välkomna tillbaka. Missa inte mina gäster som jag bjudit in till lunchen. Det är Shirley Clamp, Marika Karlsson och E-Type. Det kommer att bli jättespännande. Nu ska ni få se en spännande intervju. Jag tyckte det var oerhört spännande att möta den här kvinnan. Hon var 24 år gammal, hade ett toppjobb på New York Post. Hon hade en lägenhet på Manhattan och var nykär. Plötsligt så började hon bete sig på ett sätt som var helt olikt henne. Hon blev till slut psykotisk, lades in på sjukhus och ingen förstod vad det var. Till slut upptäcktes det att hennes hjärna angrep hennes kropp. Lyssna på den här intervjun. Welcome, Susannah Cahalan. You are the writer of this book, Blackout. And when I was reading this is your story. This has been going on in my head the whole weekend because it's unbelievable what happened to you. I would like you to go back and describe in what situation in your life you were when you discovered that something was wrong.
So this happened 4 years ago. I was 24 years old, just starting a whole new life in New York City, young journalist, just starting a new relationship. So kind of everything was new. And, you know, my life as a reporter, you know, a tabloid reporter, just breaking news reporter, was in such upheaval. You know, every day I didn't know what assignment I would have. So it kind of took me longer to realize that something was wrong.
You were in love?
I was in love, and, you know, everything was kind of up in the air,
yeah.
You know, everything was new. And then I started noticing that I started behaving kind of uncharacteristically. You know, I became jealous of this boyfriend I started, you know, dating very recently. He had an ex-girlfriend, and I became obsessed with her, and I snooped through his things. I mean, really.
And this wasn't your normal behavior?
This was not who I think I am. And I became obsessed with the idea that my apartment had bed bugs. And I actually had an exterminator come in and take a look at my apartment. He said, "You don't have bed bugs," but I was still insistent and obsessive about this. And again, I'm not an obsessive person, so it's all kind of just didn't make sense. But I didn't really think much of that until I had numbness on one side of my body. And I didn't connect the emotional kind of behavioral changes to the physical ones, but I went to a doctor who basically said it was nothing. I was just, you know, I just had a minor virus. So I moved on, but I was very tired. I had, you know, I had trouble getting to work. When I was at work, I couldn't concentrate. And then from there, things got progressively worse.
And you had a breakdown at work? Just
yes.
Fell in tears?
Yes, started crying hysterically one moment, and then the next moment laughing. You know, feeling the happiest I've ever felt in my life, and then feeling the saddest I've ever felt in my life in a matter of seconds.
You had a boyfriend, and your parents were very close during that time. What do you think they thought about it? I mean, how did they react it? Because they knew you very well as well.
Oh, yes. I mean, even my colleagues at work were very concerned about me. But my boyfriend was particularly concerned because we were spending the most amount of time together. And he was noticing my erratic behavior. And at that point, my parents were concerned, but I thought maybe I was having a hard time adjusting to this new life in New York City and living on my own for the first time.
So what happened? When did you really feel that this is not normal at all?
Well, there was a time when I was walking through Times Square, which is, you know, so many lights and so much going on. And I remember the colors were so bright and vivid that they actually hurt my eyes. And I felt like I was going to be nauseous, I was going to throw up. And later that night, I actually had my first seizure. And so that moment was clear. This is something really bad.
But you had been to a doctor, and the doctor said it's nothing. It's probably a virus.
Yes.
Which doctor did you go to next?
Well, after the seizure, I went into the hospital for a month. It would actually take a month to get to that doctor.
Because then it was really serious.
Yes, because I kept having seizures, and actually my behavior was getting worse and worse, and I became psychotic. And, you know, at first behavioral changes, but then I actually became aggressive and psychotic. I believed that people were playing tricks on me and turning into different people. I mean, very strange beliefs started to emerge
at that time when you were at the hospital. Do you remember anything from that time? Because I know from the book that some of these periods are totally blackout.
Yes. After that first seizure, I call it kind of the dark time because most of the things I can't remember. I remember some of my hallucinations, but beyond that, it's pretty blank.
We have footage, we have pictures taken from a camera at the hospital, but you don't remember really this. But could you describe what we see? We have the pictures here.
So if you see, I'm actually watching a television, and what I have in my right hand is a remote control, and as I'm listening to what's going on in the TV, I'm hearing myself on the news. So if you say I'm on the news, I say right there.
You're talking to yourself.
I'm talking to a nurse.
You're talking to a nurse.
And at this point, I had this delusion, basically, it's even beyond the hallucination, it's the delusion that my father had murdered my stepmother, and that the media was out to interview me and to get quotes from me. That was my hallucination.
And you
at the
were
time.
the next to be murdered or something like that?
I believe that at one point I was staying, before I was in the hospital, stats in the hospital, before that hospital stay, I had stayed with my father for a night. And I had completely imagined him beating her up. And I locked myself into a bathroom and nearly jumped out the window thinking that he was going to get me next.
Because you look very frightened.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I am just deeply, deeply scared. I mean, I know
What
that.
did the doctors, now you know, what did they think about this? That it was a psychiatry?
Yeah, at
disease,
the time, during the height of that, where, you know, when you have those hallucinations, the theory at the time was what's called schizoaffective disorder, and that is kind of, in layman's terms, a combination of bipolar and schizophrenic features. And so, yes, it was very firmly, they really believed that it was a psychiatric condition at that point.
But you had a boyfriend that still was at your side, your mother and father, and your father kept a diary all these times, so you know now afterwards what happened. But there was a doctor that played a key role in your life.
Yes.
He was called Dr. House as a nickname.
My mom called him that, yes.
Your mother called him
Yes.
that. Who is that?
So Dr. Suel Najjar at NYU is a neurologist and an epileptologist. And basically, I was in the hospital for about 2.5 weeks at that point, and getting worse and worse, and actually sliding into a catatonic state. So no emotions, nothing. I couldn't even really swallow on my own. I couldn't read. I couldn't write. I would drool.
Paralyzed, sort of.
My arms out like this, you know, held out like this in unnatural poses. So he was called in because I had seen 10 doctors at that point, and they all were at a loss. They had no idea what was going on. All my blood tests are coming back normal. So there's no sign. There's, you know, everything's normal on paper, but I'm getting worse and worse. So they call him in because he had this reputation of being kind of a renegade and out-of-the-box thinker. And so he came in, and the first thing he decided to do after doing a neurological test on me was he asked me to draw a clock. And that clock drawing became the key for him.
So what did it look like, the clock you drew?
So I drew all the numbers, 1 through 12, on the right-hand side, completely neglecting the left-hand side. I mean, it's entirely blank. The left is entirely blank. And for him, that showed that the right side of my brain was likely impaired in some way, inflamed, he said. He used the word inflamed. And he thought, okay, this is the key. No psychiatric condition will show a clock like this. This is a neurological condition. And to confirm this, he ordered me to have a brain biopsy to confirm
So
that.
what did he discover?
So he discovered later that I was suffering from a newly discovered form of autoimmune encephalitis called anti-NMDA receptor autoimmune encephalitis, which is where your body's immune system begins to target and attack the brain.
So it becomes an enemy.
Yes, your own body turns against you.
Turns
Yes.
against you. From that on, because I mean, he is such an important person in this process. What kind of medication or treatment did you get?
So he wanted to basically control the immune system. So he gave me high dose of steroids and immune therapies called plasmapheresis and IVIG treatment. That was the combination therapy that he used. I mean, you know, it's fairly simple and straightforward. And I was on those medications for, I'd say, about a year, on and off, receiving steroids and all those things.
You are playing a very important part in people's life, people that are suffering from this quite unusual disease, because you were the first one that were treated this way.
Well, I was the first person at NYU to be diagnosed with the disease, and the 217th person in the world to be diagnosed, because the disease itself was only discovered in 2007. So I was treated in 2009. So 2 years marks the difference between getting a diagnosis and me not getting a diagnosis. But now there are thousands of people who have been diagnosed subsequently.
How long did it take until you became normal again?
I would say, you know, it was a long, slow march. That recovery was, that for me, it was the hardest part. I think for my parents, not knowing.
You were impatient, you wanted to get well.
I wanted to get better, and living in a world where you're in limbo and you're not fully yourself, and everyone can see that you're not fully present, and people think you're slow. And, you know, it was just a horrible experience. But I would say about a year and a half.
Were you still at the hospital during the treatment, or you were at home?
I was at home. I was in the hospital for a month.
Life.
Yeah. And so think about, you know, when you're 80% yourself and running into old high school friends, and them looking at you like, what? They have no idea who this person is. You know, they don't even know how to relate to this new you. I mean, I talked so slowly. I couldn't really follow conversations. You know, the steroids make your face, you know, this big, and you know, you're walking around this world knowing that people are kind of, you know, talking down to you and being, how are you? You know, and it was just living that kind of half-life was so hard.
So how long did it take until you became like you are now?
I would say about a year and a half to fully get back.
But then you were aware of everything, because before probably you didn't suffer in the same way because you didn't even remember what happened.
That's exactly it. I mean, that month long in the hospital, I hardly remember anything. And then several months after, I don't remember much. You know, it's almost like ignorance is bliss. You know, I didn't know what was going on. But once I got that sense of self back, that's when it became very hard.
It's interesting how you reacted also with shame and guilt, because you read in your father's diary what really happened to you. Yeah. It's a very, very moving part in the book, how he really, he was fighting so much for, I mean, not giving up hope.
Yes. Yeah, no, I mean, my whole family really was key. And, you know, my father and I didn't have the best relationship before. And then after this had now we have very solid relationship, because he was there every day. And he had this motto that he'd ask me what the slope of the line is. And I would say positive, and that would mean we're getting better every day. And that was his kind of motto, is that we'd have to just one day at a time to take it and try to make each day a positive step.
It must have been weird to read afterwards how you really behaved.
Oh, yeah, it was very bizarre. You don't think yourself capable of some things. For example, I learned from my mother that at one point I wanted coffee, and she was taking me to, this before I was in the hospital, and she was taking me to a doctor's appointment, and I was getting increasingly erratic, and I pushed an old lady out of the way to get coffee. I mean, I learned that I ripped out electrodes out of my hair and kicked and punched nurses and ran screaming down the hospital corridors trying to escape. I mean, these things that you never thought really that you're capable of doing, you know, believing that my father could kill someone. I mean, that's
and you still live with your boyfriend?
I am, yes.
Which is fantastic,
yes.
too, because you hadn't known each other for long.
No, we had been dating about 5 months before I was struck with this illness.
Are you totally back to normal again? No?
You know, it's a hard question. I think so. I think I am, but it's hard to say, because I can't really compare the person who I was before. I'm a different person now, undoubtedly, but I don't know if it's because of the experience, having this incredible, life-changing, horrific, and in some ways amazing experience subsequently when writing this book has changed me. So I don't know if it's biologically that my brain has changed in some ways, and how much environment and experience has changed me.
Do you think you get a better understanding of people suffering from problems or diseases?
Undoubtedly. I think I know what it's like to be stuck and believe, to be trapped in your own head. And really, on paper, if you were just to describe all of the way I presented, I had schizophrenia. But the only difference is that I was cured. I mean, really, on paper, it was the same thing.
Through your book, a lot of parents and people suffering probably from the same thing have been, cured. And especially I was thinking of one girl. I think it was after an interview in TV.
Yes. I've actually had several experiences like this now. That one particular case was a woman who, she was a teenager, and she was in a psychiatric hospital, and her father's sister saw me on the Today Show in the U.S.
With millions of viewers.
Right. And she said, maybe Emily, her name's Emily, maybe she has a similar variant of this, maybe you should look into this. And after a lot of prodding, a long story, but basically the doctor said, no, I don't think she has this. And then she started having seizures, and they finally tested her, and she had it. And now she graduated college, she's doing fantastic. And, I've had many stories like this. I had a little 6-year-old girl whose mother read my book and thought, my daughter has this, and she did. And she's doing wonderfully, doing back in school, doing amazing. I met her in person at one of my readings that I did. I've had these incredible experiences because of this book.
Now you're a journalist. Have you understood anything of why this happened? Why does the body attack itself?
It's a mystery.
It's a mystery.
It's a mystery. I mean, doctors still don't understand, and autoimmune diseases are so complicated, and we're still kind of at the very beginning stages of understanding why autoimmunity affects women more than men, why the body decides to turn against itself, why it makes these antibodies that start targeting the brain, why, those whys have not been answered yet.
What is your relationship with Dr. Nadjan?
He's my savior. He's a man who saved my life.
You see him?
I see him regularly. We go out to dinner, and we've become so enmeshed in our lives. He actually said to me, he has 2 daughters of his own, and he said, "You're my 3rd daughter," which is so moving. I mean, I just adore him.
Thinking out of the box is so important, I think, with doctors. But how is he looked upon? I mean, being a person that think out of the box, sometimes the environment look very suspicious of that person.
Definitely, and I think that prior to this experience, he was kind of an outsider, and I think he was kind of that kind of renegade, oh, we don't know about him. But I think now he is at a very higher level, and I think people now finally fully appreciate his talents and his forward thinking and his creative thinking. I think he finally gets kind of the status he deserves, that he really is owed.
You said that you are back to normal, but you don't really know if you're the same person. Probably not, because you have this experience. But are you very suspicious now with small symptoms on your body or behavior or brain?
Yes. I mean, I've had 2 kind of scares after this experience, largely been healthy, knock on wood. But, I had one where I had numbness in my left side, which is what started everything. And I went to Dr. Najjar, and he was instantly concerned, and then 2 MRIs later, and a million blood tests and all these things. And then, basically I have carpal tunnel. But, for the normal person, he would say, oh, you have carpal tunnel. But for me, I have to go through these elaborate hoops to kind of, for my health, because it's, it's constantly in the back of my mind, because there is a relapse rate. It can come back. Yes.
But you have to move forward.
Yes. You can't
think about it all the time.
It does not control my life at all.
So what about your future? You're still a reporter at New York Times.
New York Post.
Oh, no, Post, sorry.
Yes. No, I do book reviews for the Post, and I freelance. But I spend, I'd say, about majority of my time now talking about this and advocating for this. And I'm actually a part of a nonprofit in the U.S. called the Autoimmune Encephalitis Alliance that helps people and helps spread awareness, and also helps helps spread awareness to doctors, because that's key, doctors and psychiatrists. And so that's kind of been taking up a lot of my time these days.
I hope they will look now and probably think out of the box, because I think it's getting more and more. I mean, we see more and more of these doctors today.
I hope so. I hope so. And I hope that it spreads here and beyond. And, I think undoubtedly there are people who are suffering from this in this country, in every country. And I hope that my story can help shed light on other people and help end suffering, you know, end needless suffering, really.
Thank you so much, and good luck with your important book and work.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for having me.